All right. Looks like we got a packed room. That's great. How's everybody doing this afternoon? Yeah, all right. You guys doing everything you need to keep Austin weird? If not, you got a couple days left. So show of hands here. Who came here in hopes of seeing a bunch of PowerPoint static slides? A couple people. Yep, doing your job to keep it weird. Thank you. Who came here to see some really cool stuff built in Tableau? Awesome, awesome, perfect. That's what we're going to do today. Before we do that, we're going to introduce ourselves so you have a little idea of who we are, why we're up here speaking. So I'll start with myself since I don't have any manners. My name is Kevin Taylor. I am it goes downhill from here. So I am a sales consultant in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've spent was that a Raleigh, North Carolina hoot? Go Wolfpack. Yeah, Wolfpack, all right. My kind of crowd. One Wolfpack fan, that about sums it up. And read my last bullet point. Average sports clubs, yep. All right, so I'm a sales consultant out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been doing this business intelligence, that is, for about 17 years. It's about all I know. I spent 5 years as a customer at Tableau before joining Tableau earlier this year. So before those 5 years, about 12 years there, I used various tools, various technologies. Never did I want to work for those vendors. So I'll let you read between the lines. The two beautiful girls here are my twin daughters, Casey and Kennedy. 2.5 years ago, I made a trade I traded in my one life for their 2 lives. Best trade I ever made. I am the head of security, so keep your sons away, please. It's already a problem. And then the last bullet point about me there, I am a proud supporter of some really average sports teams. My Mets did make the wild card game one day in the playoffs. I won't even name. We talked about NC State, Raiders, things like that. It doesn't go well. So I'll turn it over to Ben so he can introduce himself as well.
Thanks, Kevin. As Kevin said, my name is Ben Neville. I work in our professional services department. I know not as many A's for my non-existent daughters. This is my wife. Before I get into my favorite things, I'm gonna say she'll be number one because she did point out she doesn't exist on this slide in a bullet point. So I'll get that one out of the way. But I actually worked for Tableau for about 5 years. I started back in early 2012. I think I was employee number 204 or so. Who's counting? And really awesome to see. I mean, there are more employees more people in this room right now than there were at Tableau back then. So really awesome to see the growth. Right now I'm in the UK. I've been over there for 1.5 years. I'm on a short 2-year deal, and then I'll come back home to Austin. So good to be back. It is as weird as I remembered. Still love it. So I travel around for work. I go all over the country, now all over Europe, Middle East, and Africa is my very narrow territory at the moment. And during that travel, I get to indulge in a few of my favorite things. Travel being number one. Beer, that's a heavy theme throughout that, so stay tuned. Sleeping in is going to be my number 3 favorite. I can do all that because I don't have any children. So, cute as they are.
Pros and cons.
And I'll turn it back over to Kevin for being such a good sport.
So the pros and cons. All right, so if you've been using Tableau for any period of time, you've probably seen the Show Me function, right? Show Me function is the functionality that lets you pick some dimensions, pick some measures, and in a single click, you're going to get a view to render, right? You have your common chart types. You got bar charts, line charts, pie charts, things of the sort. You have some more sophisticated charts like box plots and scatter plots. But this is far from all you can do with Tableau. There's so many ways that you can tell the stories of your data using Tableau if you'll just go outside the box a little bit here. If you need inspiration, check out Tableau Public. Check out the seemingly endless number of community blogs. Get some inspiration. That's where we were inspired, or how we were inspired to do some of these chart types today. We'll call out some of those blogs so you can go check them out. Now, even if we had all day to do this, we wouldn't be able to get through all the things you could build in Tableau. So we have 45 minutes. What we're going to do with that is take 8 chart types that we think are some of the more commonly requested ones or the commonly used ones, and we're going to talk about those. Now, first of all, let's show you what those are. I'm going to cover the ones on the left, the hex tile maps, Pareto charts, trellis charts, heat map calendars. Ben's going to cover lollipops, donuts, waffles. I'm getting hungry. Seems like that'd be the one to cover that, right? And then, of course, bump charts. We're going to attack this tag team style, rapid fire. We're going to go really fast. We're going to cover a lot of content. Don't encourage you to try to stick along. If you want to, go for it. but we're going to go at a fast pace. And then to make sure we get all 8 builds done, we're not going to slow down. So I just throw that disclaimer out there. We will give you a finished workbook, a starting workbook. It's all within the wherever our resources are going to be. Probably should know that. But you'll be able to do that step-by-step instructions plus the blogs. We cheated. We went to the blogs. It's the #1 form of flattery. So in addition to show you how to create them, we'll talk about maybe some of the pros and cons, the pitfalls, when you might want to use some, when you might not want to. And of course, we'll talk about the blogs. So let's jump right in. This one's a crowd favorite. We see this a lot on the web now. It's the hex tile map, and I am getting out of PowerPoint until the end. We're going to jump in.
We thought you might like that.
First thing I want to talk about, where are we in here? We're going to go to Tableau. So hex tile maps. Don't worry about what the data shows right now. Is there anything popping off this map? A couple states maybe, a couple red states in there. If you were to use the show me version, which is usually pretty good, you're going to get something like this. Doesn't quite pop off the screen for you. Alaska, for one, is huge because the globe is a sphere, and when you flatten it out, the things towards the poles get bigger. The states in the east are certainly not the same size as the states in the west. Even if you're not from here, you can see that here. California is a lot larger than Maryland and Delaware. You might think one state has a bright red if you were to look at it this way. So I just wanted to show you a couple examples before I talked about it. So those are the two very common use cases I see it used for. But if precise geography is really important to you, don't use a hex tile map. I'm from North Carolina. I know that Virginia is not to the west of North Carolina, but it is in my hex tile map. And you can get different map plottings. So that's one thing you're going to need if you do these in Tableau is a hex map plotting. So it's just your X and Y coordinates. If you've ever done anything with like floor plans with Tableau and mapping things out, there's ways to do that with X, Y. It doesn't have to be latitude and longitude. And then we're going to need a custom shape. I'm going to use a rotated hexagon here. And I do encourage you to use a PNG or a GIF. Tableau builds things in tiles, which are squares. So if I have a hexagon inside of it and I use a JPEG, when I color it, it's going to color the entire square instead of the shape. So just know that you need to use a PNG or a GIF. One great blog to go to, Matt Chambers, if anybody's been coming to these conferences, I don't remember what year it was, but he was in our Iron Viz competition, and he has one of the coolest named blogs, so I picked that one, Sir Viz-A-Lot blog. If anybody came to Seattle, we had Sir Mix-A-Lot as our key band there. So go check that out. But here's the build. I'm going to use school debt. So when you graduated college, in 2004 compared to 2014, what was the percent increase for each state and what a student had for debt if they took out loans? To build this, here's the hex plot mapping I'm using. It's just one row for each state and an X and a Y coordinate being the rows and the columns. So I'm going to build this out now, and it won't take too long. So first thing I need to do is go to my student debt, get on the right data source. Here I'm going to take my column or my rows, double click, that'll go into my rows. My columns go in, just a couple averages. Need to bring the states in here, so I'll drop that onto abbreviation. I'm going to make these a little bit bigger, default it to a circle, and the United States is upside down. So I'm going to right click on my axis and reverse it. When I reverse it, it starts to look like the United States. Now I want to change my shape. So I go to my shape, and I've saved this in my custom shapes. So go check out the video on creating custom shapes. But here I'll go to my custom shapes, pick my hexagon that I want to use. I tried a lot of them. This one is the one I feel worked the best. Let me make that size just a hair bigger here and get it to where there's just a little bit of white space in between. Now I can take my 10-year change, that's my measure, drop that into color, change my colors, make it something that pops a little bit better. I'm going to go with a red-black diverging, if I can find it. There it is. And I'm going to reverse it. And when I hit OK, there's the map that I showed you originally. You want to take off your grid lines and you want to get rid of your headers. That's all there is to it. There's a common theme. Most of these are pretty easy to do. Once you get the hang of them, you can knock them out in a couple seconds. So that's hex maps. Go back to the PowerPoint when you get a chance, when you get the resources, and look at again the bullet points. But I'm going to turn it over to Ben now, who's going to cover lollipop charts. Tag team.
We're doing this.
All right.
A sexy map, Kevin. If you watched my face in real time there, you would have gotten to see my disgust as he pronounced GIF. So just a little insight. We didn't practice this ahead of time together, so that was actual real time. So these are lollipop charts. And there's a couple of instances where you might want to use lollipop charts. They're kind of a sexier bar chart. That's another theme. Sometimes you just want something a bit visual, right, that pops off the screen. Sometimes you want variety. And again, this session title is Going Beyond Bars and Lines for a Reason, right? No matter what you build, that's the visually best practiced viz like 90% of the time. So sometimes you have to take just a slight deviation from best practices to go with something that catches your end user's attention, right? That's the purpose of this talk. So these are lollipop charts. They're really good for KPI type bar charts where you can color the circle on the end, which is what gives it the lollipop name, obviously. There's also ways you can use this as far as legends for shapes or other uses. I'm going to go through that one actually with you. And there's another interesting time you might want to use this, which I'll show you here. And so I say in lieu of many bars of similar length, that means when you've got a lot of bars that are roughly the same length with not much distinction between them, it's a lot of ink just on the screen, right? I know it's digital, but it's a lot of blue or whatever your color happens to be. So just to show you what that's like, if I go to our famous Superstore data set here, I'll just throw in something like subcategory, and I'll take something like average quantity will probably do it. And if you see what this looks like here, I could make it a really obnoxious blue just to make your eyes bleed, but there's something that happens here. I don't know if you can see this. It's partially the color saturation, but also just the way this is laid out. There's something called a moire effect that happens, and it'll happen with my waffle chart a bit as well. But it's when you get a lot of ink on screen or on something digital with very little white space in between, your eyes go a bit fuzzy. It's kind of like when you have overlapping concentric circles that you get that lattice work type of effect. So lollipop charts are a good way to avoid this as well, in addition to their actual really good use cases, right? So for my lollipop chart, I'm going to go over to my data sets. I used US candy sales data. I think this is from 2014. The largest 10 brands of candy sales seem to go hand in hand, lollipops and candy. So what I'm going to do here is bring in my brand, or actually let's grab, brand will work. So brand is just the top 10 types of candy, and I'm going to grab the sales and put these bars in here. So I'll rotate them. The orientation really doesn't matter. It's a very, very legible chart in either orientation. But all we need for this chart, again, really simple. This is just dual axis of two sales axes here. The first one I'm going to make a bar, or keep a bar rather, and I'm going to size it a bit down because the stem or stick or whatever you want to call it is usually a bit narrower. It's not really the focus. You're more interested in the end point of the overall value. From there, we're then going to take the second chart, convert that to a circle, and we can go ahead and just right-click this axis, select dual axis, make sure we synchronize them, and they'll be overlaid. I'm going to hide this header just to clean up the formatting a bit. And you can do other things for formatting, like take this to like a lighter gray color or something like that, size this up a bit. And then the last thing that I might do here, I design my dashboards with a pretty clean visual aesthetic. Something in me just hates devoting large chunks of my dashboard to text and legends and ways to explain the chart. I want people to just look at it and be able to understand what I'm showing them without having to provide a narrative to go along with that, right? So in this case, I'm going to change this to a shape chart, and I'm going to drag brand onto shape. And I've preloaded these shapes, and probably are not on here, are they, Kevin? We'll have to skip that one, apparently. You can also use a shape legend in there to actually throw these on the end of that lollipop chart right there. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Kevin for the Pareto.
No high five?
No high five.
All right. Got it. All right. So the next chart is Pareto charts. Pareto charts, I used them a lot in my last company. We had a lot of Six Sigma folks. They like control charts. They like Pareto charts. It's really a nice analysis tool. The economist that made it famous, I love his name, so I'll say it, is Wilfredo Pareto. That's where the name Pareto chart comes from. It's probably one you're not going to forget now. But what it talks about is the principle of 20%, your top 20% of your inputs make up 80% of your outputs. So do my top 20% of my customers make up 80% of my revenue? In this case, we're going to look at total population by country and see if the top 20% of countries by population make up 80% of the world's population. So to do this, in Tableau, you need to know a little bit about dual axes. You need to know a whole lot about table calcs, and then secondary table calcs, which work on a couple of our table calculations, and then a little bit about reference lines and drop lines, which I didn't put a bullet point. Information Lab blog, if you haven't checked out the Information Lab blog, that's one of our key partners in the UK. An amazing blog, and this is where I learned how to do this particular chart type. There's lots of versions of Pareto's. Some are prettier than others. This one's pretty middle of the road, but I like it. This is the one I use. So let's look at that exact scenario. Here what we're looking at is just a bar chart by country. You can see that tall line at the beginning. I believe that's China. That's China. 17 billion, and I don't know exactly when this data was taken. I'm going to have to look that one up. But you have China. India falls right behind with about 14, 15 billion there. And then the United States way behind down here at 4 billion, just a little under 4 billion. So what do we need to do here? First, I'm going to take that sum of population total, and I'm going to start doing some table calcs. So I right-click, add a table calculation. When I click on running total, notice down here I get the option to do and add a secondary calculation. Before I do that, I'm actually going to set it to country by specific dimension. This would have worked on a table across or pane across since I don't have any panes, but I'm actually going to take country out in a little bit. So I went ahead and set that now. Just want to let you know why I'm doing that. But I'll add my secondary calculation. So I've got my running total, and now I need the percent of total of that. So I do that. I can close out. Well, let's set this to country as well. I'll close this out, and I'm going to reset this as a line. Now I've got my output. So I'm looking for my 80%. I'll add my reference line in now while I'm thinking about it. Just set that to a constant of 0.8, not 0.9. All right, 0.8. Next piece I need to do is get a count of the countries and figure out the top 20% of those. To do that, I'm going to use control to keep the country in the detail. But now I want to create a measure off a country, make a count distinct, and I'm going to do the exact same two table calcs. So I right-click, add table calc, running total, specific dimension country, add a secondary, percent of total, based on country again, and I can close that out. That gives me my x-axis, which is my inputs. So it does my 20%. We'll add the reference line so we can get the crosshairs. Constant, 0.2. And I can start to see here that, yep, not only does 20%, the top 20% make up 80%, it actually makes up about 85%. That's where I like to use a drop line. So I can just right-click anywhere on my lines to turn those on. So I've pretty much got my Pareto. The last thing I want to do to make it look like a true Pareto is bring the sum of total population on here. So I'm going to take the actual measure here. It's in my population folder. Population total, I drag that into my rows. We're going to make this a dual axis. And I'm going to change that non-table calc one to a bar. And because I'm a stickler for details, I'm going to put my line on top of my bar so it doesn't disappear. And that, my friends, is a Pareto chart. It's that simple. I use these a lot. I encourage you to do so as well. Ben's going to handle donut. Now we're getting into the tasty stuff.
This time.
Yeah.
Through some TV magic, I now have shapes. So if you've never seen the shape trick, I'll show you this. You get to see this live, totally planned. I've got two shape files in here, each one with just some PNG images in it. And if you take those folders and go to your, sorry for doing this live, Kevin, and go into shapes. No, I was more scared what might be in your My Documents folder. Paste this into your shapes folder, which is going to be in your Tableau repository. Those shapes and those images are now referenceable by Tableau. So that's literally all you have to do to involve that bit. So donut chart. Who uses pie charts in their dashboards now? All right, not anymore. You don't. Now you got the donut chart. All right, we're gonna be friends with this today. For some reason, one of my favorite chart types. I have no justification for that. I can't defend it. It's pretty much a pie chart in disguise. There's actually kind of a running joke in my department about me loving donut charts, and I put them in all of my customer dashboards. So you knew we were nerdy, but you didn't know we were make fun of each other and develop clicks based on your favorite chart type nerdy. So we're like next level. So donut charts function really well as kind of a high-level filter. They're really, to be fair, pretty space efficient, right? You don't have to dedicate a corresponding chart to this might be some bar chart where you've got, in this case, 5 different slices where you dedicate that and then show this bar chart horizontally or vertically. You've got to dedicate a bigger rectangle of space really to get that kind of differentiation. So it's really, as far as space goes, fairly efficient as a high-level filter. You can use it in hover and dashboard actions, and it also still shows that high-level split. The other thing I like about donut charts is you can put a total value in the middle, which you really cannot do in a pie chart in an efficient way, right? There is no middle area where you can put that label in something that makes sense to people. So you'll see these a lot in kind of web trends type of data. It's kind of the in vogue visualization if such a thing exists, I guess. So the guys over at VizWiz have a really good example of this, and we'll go ahead and show you this. Now there is one other variant, and it's pretty common. It's maybe my compromise with a gauge type of chart, right? So it's a KPI to percent of total you have going for your direction clockwise around the donut, 70%, let's say, and you've got the 30% as a really light gray fill. So it shows where you're tracking towards some goal. The problems there are inherent, right? There's no way to go over 100%. You can't go all the way around a donut and keep going. You can, but it's very hard to tell. So let's go ahead and build this. Again, this one's pretty simple. All you really need is the dual axis trick with chart types you already know. So what I'm going to do is go to my data set here. As an Austin native, I'll tell you about a little local treasure called Gordo's Donuts. Delicious. They serve ridiculously Texas-sized portions of donuts. So my donut chart data set is on donuts. In my data set, I've got the types of donuts, and I've also grouped them into the icing type on top of the donut, right? You want to know what you're getting before you buy it. So let's go ahead and put that on detail. We can convert this to a pie chart, and maybe put that on color. And then we'll take our number of records or number of donuts and put that on angle. So this is your standard pie chart. Whether you get there through that manual method or you show me, doesn't matter, right? There's nothing magic about how we build this first step. But what we need to use is a dual axis. So one way to do this is to take a white circle or some other image and float it over the top of your chart in a dashboard. I don't like that for a few reasons. It doesn't scale very well in automatic sizing dashboards. It kind of covers your chart, which makes it not so interactive because you can't click on it anymore. So there's a much better way, which I do through dual axising. The problem here is a dual axis means 2 axes. We have 0 axes at present. So what we need to use is a placeholder axis, which is a common trick for a lot of visualizations that you're trying to build that are kind of these more creative types. So this one, I use min1. That's kind of my go-to. All it does is drop this on an axis from 0 to 2. It'll drop it right on the 1. So we'll go ahead and scale this up a bit. And then I'll just drag this out next to itself to duplicate it. Now we've got 2 pie charts. The second pie chart is going to be the overlay. All we need for that is really the hollow center of the donut, right? So we don't need all of these colors and the actual pie chart. We really just need that circle. So I'm just going to take all of the detail out of here, and you've got this gray circle. We'll go ahead and scale it down just a bit. I can right-click my axis to dual axis this chart. And now all I've got to do is convert it to something that blends in with the background. So if my actual shading of my workbook, or of my sheet here was this gray, now it would blend in, right, and look like a donut. Or if I wanted to keep it as kind of a white chart, then I can just convert this color to white, and now I've got a donut. The last things you have to do for the cleanup here are hide your headers, is a common theme here as well, and maybe I'll put my label on the middle. So if I take my number of donuts, put that on a label, and I can edit this and say maybe something like format that a bit better, and you're done. The last thing you have to do, this is best practice for any pie charts or donut charts, is to sort these. So what you want to do is sort your pie slices on descending order by number of donuts. The reason is it's very difficult to tell, for the human eye to tell that shape and that shading and proportionality against each other. So 2 slices of very similar size, human eye can't really differentiate. So this is a good way to have your end user always get more out of this data by being able to compare more easily. Back to you, Kevin. Yeah, you did so good.
Nice, nice. It's interesting that you picked the VizWiz blog for that. That's Andy Kriebel's blog, if you guys don't know. And his motto is, friends don't let friends use pie charts.
If you read in the comments section, I've read down there, and some guy asked for some tips, and he says, how should I do this? And he says, don't. I made this blog as a joke. So Andy Kriebel shares the same sentiment as my coworkers, that donuts are not the end-all, be-all.
And I apologize to anybody that was watching the battery there. I got my plug in, so that fun's over for you. Sorry about that. Next chart, or the next, this one's not really a chart type. This is trellis panels, and it's a way to handle small multiples or too many lines, if you will. And I'll talk about those. If you do small multiples, which Tableau does well, if you do too many of them, you'll end up with a horizontal or a vertical scroll or a horizontal scroll, depending on how you lay it out. And what's out of sight is out of mind, so it's hard to compare two different values in there, or two different slopes. And then if you put too many lines on a single chart, it becomes pretty illegible, if you will. And a lot of times, if you've got anything with a lot of magnitude and anything else with less magnitude, you're not going to be able to see what's going on with the lesser. And I'll show you examples of both of those. To do this, there's some pretty naughty calculations. One is, well, first you need to know a little bit about index. Then you have, and I put modular, but that's actually modulo. So modulo calculation for columns. And then we do a ceiling calculation, which involves using integer values, which I'll show you here as well. My mentor at Tableau is Andy Cotgreave. He does an incredible blog called Gravy Antidote. And that's where I got the information on how to do this. I also got the calculations right from that blog. So you don't need to know how to do these calculations. You just need to know how to do copy and paste. All right? So let me look at a couple. And I don't have the example of the one with too many lines, but I'll build it really quick. So here, this would be if there's too many. You've got the scroll going on. I don't remember what China looked like anymore. Don't remember what the United States. All right, so you guys get that. I'm going to duplicate this and build out the one where let's take the country, let's put that in color. Am I going to get that right? Oh, that was too easy. So if you get this, it's easy to see United States and China. It's really hard to see what's going on with the rest of the countries. Can you tell me if the other countries are going up or down? It's just everything gets flattened out. So the way we want to handle that is through the trellis chart. So here, I'm going to show you the calculations, and I'll have to blow them up in size, I'm certain. So column, first of all, is the modulo. And let me edit this guy, and let's see if I can I change the size of this?
Control scroll wheel.
Control scroll wheel. Hey, look at that. All right, got it nice and big. So this is a Boolean if or an intrinsic if. A lot of people call it different things, but it says basically if the index modulo number of columns is equal to 0. Modulo is just a remainder. If I take the one, divide it by the other, what is the remainder? So if the remainder is equal to 0, then we go with the number of columns, which is a parameter. I'll show you how we use the parameter. Else, use the index modulo number of columns. So you use the remainder. So that will be our column. So I'll drag that column in to columns, of course. So column goes into column. And I'm going to set this to compute using specifically country. Now to get the number of rows, we're going to use another calculation. The first part of that, and I like to build out my calculation into different pieces. I could have done this all in one calc, but it helps me remember where I'm at. So I can edit this one, use my control wheel that I just learned, and it's just index divided by number of columns. So remember that for a moment. And we're going to do the row, which is basically our ceiling calc. So I edit that one, and this one looks like if. So it says if the index, what is it? Index divided by number of columns equals integer of row val. So the integer is just, if you have a decimal, it just rounds it down closer to 0. So you're actually going to the lower, I guess the lower floor of that number. There's floors and there's ceilings. So this one, we do that, and then else if it's less than 0, then the integer of row val. I'm not going to bore you with the rest of that. Let's get to the build of this. So I'll take that row, I'll bring it into row. This is really going to move fast. We'll come here, compute using country. Then the only thing I need to do is take country out of my rows, drop it in label, and I've got my trellis chart. All those in one view. I can use my parameter now and say I want 5 columns, 6 columns. That could be ideal. 7 columns. Now I've got a horizontal scroll. So you can play with those. I can also move my top to top 25 here. So if I go top 25, maybe I need to go to 5 columns. So with this, the only thing you need to know here, and you might want to, first of all, I would get rid of the rows and the columns as well. I'll right-click and remove those headers. But notice the axes are different. You might want to annotate that depending on your audience. Every row has a different axis. So if you look at the top row, the emissions are all the way up at 8 million, down to the bottom row is the highest 300,000. So you can see that. But you can see that China's emissions have been going crazy up. It's actually surpassed the United States. So you get that context. That's the trellis chart, or also known as a panel chart, depending on what part of the world you're in. And that's all there is to that. I'm going to turn it back over to Ben. He's going to cover more food. Waffles.
Waffles. I'm making myself hungry, so this is good. So I've done donut charts. We've gone through the lollipop charts. Now we're on waffle charts. So waffle charts, again, a lot of these charts have overlaps with one another, right? There's similar use cases. So waffle charts, much like a donut chart, have two primary use cases in my mind. One, to show how multiple items stack up to the total, which is the one on the left. The other is the smaller KPI type charts, and that's essentially a percent of total chart. So you could use stacked bars, you could use a donut chart, you could use an area, you could use 2 lines. There's a lot of ways to show this, but again, variety makes your views more engaging within reason. So those are the good ways to use this. The blog here I've got is Tableau Love. That's actually a guest starring Jesse Gebhardt, who goes way, way back in Tableau. I think he started back in 2007 or so. And that's the only thing I could find online about waffle charts in Tableau, except for something on the forum. So maybe I'll have to post this out somewhere. In any case, you'll have the most up-to-date workbook. So as far as I know, you'll be the most up-to-date waffle chart users in Tableau, for better or for worse. So I've done lollipops on candy. I've done donuts on donuts. Any ideas for this data set? Nah, see, but you forgot my first love was beer. I called that out, so we're going to do this one on beer. Just call the audible. So you need 2 things for this. This is another case of blending. So one thing we need is the actual waffle chart data. It's really simple data. It's essentially a matrix approach. So you've got 10 ones, 10 twos, 10 threes, and columns, and then you've got a matching 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 through 10 on the rows side. So if I drag those into my data here, I'll put rows on rows, columns on columns, and you see I get this matrix grid type of approach, which is the beginning of my waffle chart. Now the reason you couldn't just use your data initially is because you'd be only drawing the partial. I actually want to draw the empty cells as well. So the other thing we need to do is create a combined field, because I'm going to use a table calculation that shows my rank. So I'll right-click these 2 fields, combine field, and now I've got one which is both. So I'll put that on detail. And now I've got a square chart, and I'll make sure Tableau doesn't decide to override that. And now I've got a square in every single grid. I just need to really color them and size them appropriately, right? So if I tab back over to my data, and I swear I'm not getting paid by this company, but as a beer lover, if you have a mobile phone, I imagine everyone in here, I've seen a lot of them taking pictures. There's an app called Untapped. It tracks your beer like Yelp. You can check in and rate it, and then it'll recommend other beers like that, so you can find other beers that are like the one you like, or other ones by the brewery. I had a really good idea. If you mix Tinder and Untapped together, you could match with people that drank the same things as you, but never got off the ground. So anyway, you can have that idea. That's free. Somebody can code that app. So what I've got is a rating. It's 1 to 5 here. It's not actually percentages. So what I want to do is create a percentage. So all I'm going to do is create a calculation called rating percent, and I'm just going to divide this by 5. I really just want to weight this calculation, right? So now I've got my rating percentage. I'm going to drag that onto detail for the moment. Say OK. And we'll go back to our waffle chart data. Now, this is where the magic of the waffle chart happens. It's an index calculation, which tells you what that percentage is, rounds it, and then shades the first. In this case, I think it's 67%. So it's going to shade the first, or 76. Shade the first 76 squares one color, and the next one's what I call blank. And I'll assign the colors after the fact. So what I'm going to do is take my average and make that rating percentage, and I'll get rid of this aggregation that Tableau thought was smarter than me. And now we've got, again, a calculation which just says if it's before that number, which is going to be 76%, then color it, otherwise don't. So we say OK here, drag color onto color, and you see you get this crazy grid for a second. We just need to make sure this computes correctly. So I'm going to say use specific dimensions, rows, and columns. And you'll see you get this weird vertical shading. That's not the way things work. Normally you want them horizontally, like filling a beer in a glass. Anybody? Yeah? No? Too much of a stretch. All right, so we'll pull columns down. Now you see I get that shading from, vertically. It's filling from top to bottom, actually. So what I want to do is invert my rows axis on the left side. So all I'm going to do for that is click on the axis, say sort, and just switch it to descending. Now I can say, again, a few more things for your formatting because you're pretty much done. I'll say fit height. I'll scale these a bit bigger. Not that big. Do the same thing as Kevin does. Hide these headers. You want to clean these up, right? And then you can decide to shade these. So I'll pull this. It's like a nice logger, maybe. And then for this blank, I'll color it the same thing. And here's another easy tip for this. What I do for the lighter one, I just go down to saturation, knock off the last character. It's a really light version of the first color. So once you're done with that, you've got a really easy chart. And if you want to add an annotation to it, that's how I add the label. So I right-click, annotate the mark, and then I just strip out everything that's not that last percentage there, format this up to be, I don't know, 28, 24 font maybe, and get rid of your line, and make sure you convert that to an average. Then you get to go back and edit your annotation if you do it in this order. And now we've got an annotation of the actual percentage of the chart in the view, and that is a waffle chart. Over to you, Kevin.
All right.
You're not going to tap me in.
You got claps for that one. I don't recall getting claps. That's good. So I learned something new every session I see. Even after using this for 6 years, I've never used that trick with the saturation, just pulling off the one. That is slick.
I learned that today. Taught
Slick
myself.
stuff. Nice. Nice. So the last one I'm going to cover is the heat map calendar. This is one of my favorites, kind of like donut charts, pie charts. Some people don't like them. Some people think there's a lot better ways. I use these a lot. My main use is as a selector. So I don't remember if anybody remembers, or I don't know if anybody remembers when we put bubble charts in our Show Me, and you guys heard of Stephen Few? Anybody read Stephen Few books? I grew up on Stephen Few, read every one of his books, but he's pretty hardline. He was not happy when we put bubble charts in Show Me, but Jock McInlay, who's on our R&D team, fought back and said, you know what, it doesn't always have to be about accuracy. People in journalism get paid by clicks, and if you have 100 bubbles out there and one big red bubble in the middle, you want to click that thing. So it's not always about accuracy. In this case, kind of getting off point there, I use this as a selector, but I also think it's really good for daily looks. I think it's really good for looking at the day of the week, looking how things work within a month. The other thing I like about this chart is as you build it, kind of the journey is the destination. As you build this, you get insight as you go. Again, I'm using VizWiz. We're high on the Andy Kriebel and the Andy Cottgreave stuff apparently today. It's a great blog. I go out there, check that one out. He's one of our Zen masters. But what you need to know here is a little bit about date formatting, a little bit about date parts, and that's about it. So to build this out, we're going to look at Dow Jones index data. So if I were to look at it this way, this is a pretty common way to look at stock data. It's got a lot of ups and downs. It's almost like every other day. It's up, down, up, down, up, down. That's why they say you can't beat the market, because it's always going up, down, up, down, up, down, right? All right, so how do we build this into a calendar? And I'm going to, this nice big dip that you see here, we're going to see that again, and we're going to talk about that. But the first thing I'm going to do is go to my date in my columns, and I'm going to choose a date part. If you're not familiar with Tableau or haven't been using it very long, this part right here can be a little confusing, where it's year, quarter, month, year, quarter, month. The top is discrete, the bottom is continuous. I think one day we'll see those in green and blue, maybe, hopefully. Maybe a little bar beside it. But here we're going to choose more, and I'm going to go to weekday. Just like that, I got a little bit of insight. Looks like I should buy on Tuesdays and sell on the other days. Maybe I got that backwards. I'm not a financial advisor. Please don't go listen to me and invest. I was going to say something, but it's one of our partners. No. All right. So next thing we want to do is we want to bring in the week. So to do that, I'm going to use a right click. Here's my date. It's nicely named date. I'm going to right click and drag it in, and I'm going to replace the index change just by going over the top of it. I'm going to choose week. All right. That doesn't look like a calendar. Let me change it to a square type. It's starting to look like a calendar, but there's not many months with 53 weeks. That's an entire year. I want to get it down to 1 month. So I'm going to take my date, and I'm going to right-click and drag it again. This is all about right-clicking dates and dragging. So I right-click, and I'm going to choose month, year. Now, one problem with the calendar chart is I really haven't found, and I don't think anybody's found, a really good way to do this for more than 1 month without using more than one worksheet. Do it one for each. You can create a nice dashboard with 12 months on it, but I haven't found the way to do it in one worksheet. So I challenge you. So June 2016 is what I'm going to choose. There's that big dip we saw before. Let me get rid of the weeks. Just getting rid of that header really is all I'm doing. And the last thing I need to do is bring in date to my label. I'm going to choose day, discrete day, so I'm going to get the day number. And I've already formatted it to be in the upper right. So that's a good-looking calendar. If I say so myself, I'll pat myself. That's a good-looking calendar. Now, I found a URL out there that has the day, the month, the year in a particular way, and I've created those calculations, just done some string calcs. There's probably better ways to do the ones that I've done, but I'm just looking at day of date here. And then I do the same for month and year. And I'm just going to drag those into my detail so that I can use it in a dashboard action. Then I'm going to come over to my dashboard. Before I do that, that big red date, the 24th, and then the 27th is pretty red too. Does anybody know what happened to the New York Stock Exchange that day? June 24th, 2016. Any Europeans? Not Brexit. Any other Europeans? Sounded like a lot of English voices. That was the day the UK left the European Union. Is that right? Okay. Had to check on that. I was like, did I get that right or wrong? Well, we'll check on it this way. We'll put it into the dashboard. Oh, put it in the dashboard here, and let's look at it. First thing I do in my dashboard, I have a URL action already. I'm going to show you that. It's just a hyperlink action. And if I edit that, I don't know if I can make this any bigger. Let's try this a little bit here. That doesn't do much. But here I've got a URL. And in here I've got month, which I insert by using this button. So you can insert values into a URL so that when I click, those values get placed into the URL. So when I do that, the 24th, June, and 2016 get plugged in, which is already in there conveniently below. And let's see, what does it say? UK, historic decision to leave. Yes, I got it right. They did leave the European Union on the 24th of June 2016. That's how I like to use calendars. You just hop through and you can pick it, send it to a web URL. You don't have to do that in your dashboard. You can send it out to another tab in your browser as well. So before I hand it back over to Ben, since Ben's going to close it out, he's going to do one more chart type in bump charts. I personally just want to say thank you. I spoke as a customer last year, but it's an absolute honor and privilege to come up here and speak to you guys as an employee now. And having been in your shoes as a customer, I hope you guys have a grand time here. If I can help you in any way, please reach out afterwards. But I'm going to turn it over to Ben. He's going to close us out here. And then we're going to do some Q&A.
So we're going to end on bump charts. I know it's a deviation from food, which is terribly disappointing to most of you. But this is, the example here is the popularity of cars in the US over time. I realize it's a bit small. I can get a little, no, still fixed size. But what you see is the popularity in cars over time. So I think it's from 2000 onwards to 2015. So if you look, we're a pretty monochrome nation, white, black, gray this year, and silver in that order. Those are the top 4 choices. But the reason this chart is useful is showing actual ranks, right? If you're showing, much like Kevin did in his emissions data, where China and the US were skewing the rest of the data and everything else was just lost in that crisscross of lines at the bottom, you can't really get the sense of how these things rank. So if you want to show absolute values, this is not the chart you want to choose. But when you want to show how things rank within a given column or year or whatever that happens to be, then this is the perfect chart. And Gravy Anecdotes, the blog here, this is actually this exact example, so really good, well-formatted thing here. They've got the rank, in addition, labeled on that circle, which is a really nice way to use this. So I thought for this, not really any food data that came to mind, so I decided to pick something light and not very controversial for the last viz of the day. Anybody know of any news events going on today? Yeah, all right. This is not an endorsement nor denial or dismissal of any candidate, but this is GOP primary data. This is how Trump garnered the nomination and what that looked like over time. So what I'm going to do is drag date into my column shelf. This is an aggregation of polling across time. So some of the weeks had multiple polls, some had not very many, some had some skips in there. So what I'm going to do is just take this down to a weekly level. So I'll just change this to a week. And then what I'm going to do is pull in the actual percentage chance of each candidate. So you can see this percentage chance over time, but again, there's multiple polls within a week, so I'm going to change this to an average to show you what this looks like. And again, the problem here is there's some really fuzzy areas in the middle where I can't really see what's going on. It may be hard for me to tell how these end up unless I literally go and tab through each individual candidate and find out where they rank. So I don't want anything skewing my axes. I want to normalize them all and just see how they rank within a given week. So what we use for that is a table calculation. And it's going to be candidate rank is what I use here. And this is, I'll show you why I use the float in a minute, but all we're using is rank unique of that percentage chance of the nomination. Now, the rank unique, if you haven't used rank, it's what you see is what you get. It's fairly straightforward. Rank unique means if there's a tie, rank them unique 1, 2, 3. If they're tied at 2, give them 2 and 3. Don't skip any numbers. Don't give them the same number. There's no really chance of them tying here because it goes down to several decimals, but in your data you might have a chance where you have ties between data. So what I'm going to do is take this candidate rank, drag it into my row shelf here, and now you see I get a bit of a strange chart, but you definitely see it's starting to do something different. The problem is it's not ranking the way I want. Rank, by definition, is a table calculation because I'm having to look up other values in this sheet to find out how they rank. I don't actually have that in the underlying data. So what I do is I go to my table calculation, and I can either tell Tableau how I want this to calculate by selecting candidates, or if that dialog is a bit confusing for you, I'll show you what, to me, makes the most sense, and that's going to edit table calculation, picking specific dimensions, and pulling both of these, and then I put them in the order they happen. I want, within each week, to rank the candidates. So I put week first, and then I have candidate after that. Now, I want to wipe the slate clean every week and recompute the rank, right? If they are ranked 4 one week and ranked 10 another, I want to see that. So what I'm going to do is say restarting every week. And now you see I get that same sort of view that I had before. The only other issue is that I have, again, these are two continuous axes. So in a normal axis, you get a plot that starts at 0, 0 and graphs things up. I want rank number 1 at the top. That's a normal ranking type of display. So what I'm going to do is right-click my axis, select Edit Axis, and then reverse this. Now the last thing I do, again, back to my design aesthetic, I prefer really slick visualizations. I don't want to always have to have a bunch of legends, and I want it to be immediately apparent. And also just a nice way to add in a bit of an extra kind of flair into your viz. I'll first filter it on the week so you can see this a bit better. We'll just pull out some of the early months. So here you see Trump didn't show up on the radar until late March, and didn't start moving until mid-May, and then by July, never really fell after that. So what we're going to do is add a shape image like I tried for the first chart, but was missing my shapes. They're now in this workbook. So what I'm going to do, instead of using this line axis, is also add in a second calculation, which is what I'm calculating as just the very last data point in my chart. So you'll see here I just have a final data point here. I'm going to right-click and dual axis these. You're going to see Tableau's going to add in some measure names that I'm going to pull out. And I'm going to make sure I synchronize these axes. And I'm going to convert this to either a circle chart, and you can just make it very apparent where that candidate ends up, or you can use this as a shape chart. And I'm going to drag candidate to shape. And now that I've gone ahead and dragged in my shapes, I can go to my palettes here, reload shapes, it'll requery that folder. I can go to candidates, assign palette, OK. And now you get nice faces all over your viz. So that's the way you work in a shape legend into your chart. So that's all the charts we have for you today. I'll go back to the PowerPoint just for a minute. We promised we wouldn't do this till the end, and the time has come. The purpose of this presentation was really not to show you, as Kevin said, every possible chart under the sun, right? That's not possible in the time we have together. But it was to show you some of the functionalities that are possible in Tableau and kind of broaden your horizons as to how you might think about using charts. So number one, know there's a bunch of different chart types possible in Tableau. Hopefully we gave you a few very common ones, kind of a guidebook once we give you the files of how to build those, and also some other things that exist in the community of different chart types you can build. So really appreciate you all coming out. There is a survey in your app. We'd really appreciate it if you fill that out. We're delivering this twice more, so if you'll tell us where we did well, we really need a confidence boost. And if we have anything we can fix, let us know that as well. So really thank you guys for coming out. Appreciate it.